video is about real-world problems using multiplying fractions. It's important for you to know how to multiply fractions because it's not just a skill that you're going to learn and then never use for the rest of your life. It's something that you use in your everyday that you might not even realize. So an example of this would be recipes. What would you do if you needed to make a recipe smaller than what it is? You know how to make it bigger, you can always multiply it by 2 or by 4. But if you need to make it smaller, what would you do? So let's check out this yogurt dip. In this yogurt dip, we have 2 cups of plain yogurt. We have 1 teaspoon of dried dill, 1 teaspoon of salt, a half of a teaspoon of lemon juice, 1/8 of a cup of olive oil, 1 clove of garlic, 1 colander, and 4 coffee filters. Go ahead and make sure that you have this recipe written down in your math notebook right now, because in our next slide we're going to actually be making this recipe smaller. Pause the video if you need to. Alright, so here's our yogurt dip, and this yogurt dip is only enough for 1 person. We need to make it for 20 people. So if we needed to make this for 20 people, are we going to be making a bigger recipe or a smaller recipe? Well, obviously we'd be making it for a bigger recipe. So what we need to do is we need to multiply each of these ingredients by 20 in order to get our new recipe. So let's take our plain yogurt. So we're going to take this 2 cups here. Oops. And we're going to multiply it by 20. Well, no fractions involved here. 2 times 20 is 40. So for our new bigger recipe, we're going to now be using 40 cups of yogurt. Now, let's look at our teaspoon of dried dill here. So we have 1 teaspoon times 20 people. 1 times 20 gives me 20. So I know that I need 20 teaspoons of dried dill. It's a pretty big recipe. Alright, so now I have a half of a teaspoon of salt. And if I multiply that by 20, I'll get what I need. Well, remember, to multiply a fraction by a whole number, we need to put that whole number over 1 and then multiply straight across. 20 times 1 is 20, and 2 times 1 is 2. I can't leave 20 over 2. That's not very practical. So I'm going to see how many times 2 can go into 20. 2 goes into 20 10 times. So I need 10 teaspoons of salt. Same thing with the lemon juice here. This is also a half of a teaspoon. So I know that this is going to give me the same answer as above, 10 teaspoons. I have 1/8 of a cup of olive oil times 20. 20 over 1 is going to help me solve this. 20 times 1 is 20. 8 times 1 is 8. How many times can 8 go into 20? Can't go in evenly. But 8 times 2 equals 16. So it goes in 2 whole times, and I have 4/8 left over. 4/8 can be divided by 4 on the top and the bottom in order to simplify. So 4/8 is also equal to 1/2. So that means that I need 2 1/2 cups of olive oil. And then I have 1 clove of garlic times 20 gives me 20. So I need 20 cloves of garlic. And same thing with the colander. I'm going to need 20 colanders. Alright, not that bad, right? So let's do another. Write down this recipe for a cookie mix. This is 1 cup of flour, 1/2 a teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 of a cup of butter, 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar, 1/3 of a cup of regular sugar, and 1 egg. Alright, so this recipe for the cookies makes 3 dozen cookies, and we need to make 9 dozen cookies. So we need to figure out how many times we need to multiply this recipe by to make this larger new recipe. Well, I know that 3 dozen and 9 dozen is 3 times more than what this recipe actually makes. So if I multiply this recipe times 3, then I can get a new recipe which will make 9 dozen cookies. So go ahead and pause the video, solve this recipe on your own, multiply each of the ingredients by 3, and then replay the video and we'll go over it together. Alright, so hopefully you pause the video. Let's do some multiplying. Alright, 1 cup of flour times 3 will give us 3 cups of flour. So we need 3 cups of flour. Half of a teaspoon of baking soda times 3. I'm going to put that 3 over 1 so I can multiply my fractions. 3 times 1 is 3, and 2 times 1 is 2. Now I can change 3 halves into a mixed number, which I should always do. So 2 goes into 3 one time, and I have a remainder of 1 half. So that means that I need 1.5 teaspoon of baking soda. Now, if you notice this, maybe you did all the work, but maybe some of you noticed this, that the baking soda, the salt, and the butter all call for half of a teaspoon or a cup. So you could have done the work 3 times, or you could have just realized that they all would have been exactly the same, 1 1/2. This one is a teaspoon of salt and 1 1/2 of a cup of butter. All right. So I have a 1/3 cup of brown sugar times 3. Put that over a 1. 1 times 3 is 3, and 3 times 1 is 3. 3/3 is also known as 1 whole. So I need 1 whole cup of brown sugar. Now, same thing for this. The regular sugar also calls for 1/3. So I could also just say that this calls for a cup. And I have 1 egg times 3 gives me 3 eggs. All right, how did you do? Hopefully you got all these answers correct. I didn't think it was that bad. Okay, so now it's time for you to go show what you know. When you log on to Canvas to take your quiz, you're going to be given parts of a recipe that you will need to increase in order to serve more people. So you're going to be doing exactly what we did today. You're going to be taking a recipe and multiplying it by a certain amount to make it bigger. All right, good luck.